Craving fresh, made-from-scratch Mexican food that actually tastes homemade? Cafe Rio's got you covered. Every tortilla is hand-rolled, every sauce is slow-simmered, and every bite is bursting with bold flavor. Hungry yet? Don't wait. Order now at CafeRio.com. Build your burrito, salad, or tacos exactly how you like them, and we'll have it ready hot, fresh, and fast. Whether it's lunch on the go, dinner with friends, or a full-on fiesta at home, Cafe Rio always brings the flavor and the fun. So what are you waiting for? We've got you covered. Savor the flavor and order now at CafeRio.com.
You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. I am Josh Furlong. Happy to be back with you again today. We're back to preview the Colorado game, give some updates on kind of some of the stuff that's taken place this week. It's been a busy week. Just a lot of conversations being had after that BYU loss, and obviously a lot of frustration still from the Utah side on Kyle's insistence on analytics and everything that way. And we're going to get into a little bit of that, but essentially move on and go to Colorado. So, but I think there are some important things to touch on, and so we're going to talk about those, and I think it'll merit some good conversation based on what's gone on. So, before we do that, let me tell you about our partners, Cafe Rio. Craving fresh, made-from-scratch Mexican food that actually tastes homemade? Cafe Rio's got you covered. Every tortilla is hand-rolled, every sauce is slow-simmered, and every bite is bursting with bold flavor. Hungry yet? Don't wait. Order now at CafeRio.com. Build your burrito, salad, or tacos exactly how you like them, and we'll have them ready, hot, fresh, and fast. We've got you covered. Savor the flavor and order now at CafeRio.com. All right, so, the biggest storyline coming, maybe it's not the biggest storyline, but I think maybe the biggest thing coming out of this weekend is essentially just being able to move on, right? And moving on in the sense that you can't let that loss snowball. And there's obviously some frustrations that people have of playing the BYU game the week that it is, just simply because now you have to come off an emotional high and then try to go beat an opponent that Utah should beat, right? Like they're a 14-point favorite essentially, and it would be real easy to take things off and not show out the exact same way. And so this becomes the biggest thing that Utah has to focus on. You can be frustrated that you lost, but at the end of the day, it's one loss, and you still got everything at your fingertips. You could still go 10-2 as we talked about on Monday, but the reality is how Utah responds this week is going to be a good telltale for what Utah can be for the rest of the season. The schedule lays out pretty nicely for Utah if they can do the right things and get it done, but this week is going to be a good sign into how that's going to go. So, you can't let that rivalry loss just really impact how it's going. And Utah showed great resolve after the Texas Tech loss and came out firing on all cylinders and was doing well. But now you've got a little bit more on the plate this week in terms of kind of injury reports and different things that way. But we'll see. According to Smith Snowden, after their Bloody Tuesday practice, this is the one that they work incredibly hard and put a lot of the most of the hard work in. He felt like there was a great response. You can believe the players on their words, or you can believe them on the field, and I think both of those things have to apply. It's one thing to say that things are great and the team has responded, but it's another to be able to take that and put it on the field. So we'll see, right? Like, it's easy to say these things and say that the team is ready, but we've seen in years past where they say the right things and things don't always happen, and that's true nature, right? It's easy to kind of mask our feelings or mask how things are going, and in reality, we just don't show up at times. So Like I said, this will be the big test. Don't want to dwell on that one too much, but that's going to be the biggest factor going into this game is letting that BYU loss go, using it as fuel, and kind of moving on. So we'll see what kind of response this team has and kind of how that goes. The next biggest thing here is the Devon Dampier update. Devon, he clearly has been hobbled. And, we've talked about this. He's not fully healthy. Re-aggravated his ankle injury. Was in a pretty sturdy brace going into the fourth quarter of that BYU game, and it's just been kind of tough to gauge where he's at. I've heard many different things here, and none of them all really. How do I say it? Like, there's some that feels much more valid and others that don't, right? Like, and so it's really just kind of a wait and see. And I don't want to speculate more than ever, but I truly do believe that it's not a long-term thing, assuming that he can heal and that everything would be good. But I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't start this week. I think just the nature of the injury, I think Utah would be better off to let him heal. You've got to get this win against Colorado, but at the same time, there are tougher games a la, Cincinnati that you're going to need him much more healthy. And so if you can, try out Bird Ficklin and see how he does, that's going to kind of be the situation. So I want to play some audio from Kyle yesterday and his availability to talk about this. It's true Whittingham in how he approaches injuries. Because it's a quarterback, he's going to talk about it a little bit more than anything else. But at the same time, there's not a lot there, but I think it goes into kind of how they're viewing it. And, I'm going to have some takes after this, but let's go into Whittingham's audio.
At what point this week do you kind of need to make a decision on the starter?
Saturday at 8:15. That's drop dead time, and that will be, it's only Tuesday. And so we got a lot of time left before kickoff, and so that as we get closer, I guess technically yes, 8:15 Saturday, but we'd like to have that decided by Friday, sooner if possible. But it could go to Friday. We'll see.
How does that go with the reps and maybe potentially giving Bird more reps?
Well, Bird gets more reps early in the week as Devon kind of heals up from the game, and that's kind of been standard procedure for a lot of the weeks this year. As Devon gets back to normal, Bird gets it's more front end loaded for Bird and then more back end loaded for Devon.
I know it's semantics, but does that
semantics? That's an SAT word.
We're gonna go with that one.
Yeah.
With Bird, that would officially mean he'd be QB2, right, for the rest of the year. Is that kind of what you've mentioned?
Nothing's for sure, long term. But for this week, Bird is QB2. Yes.
So not really a huge update. It's Kyle kind of doing what he does and going to the absolute last minute to be able to say whether a quarterback's going to play or not. And I think, the situation here is it's exactly how he says it, though. They're going to wait till the very last minute to see if Devon Dampier can go. He did make clear in a little different part of the interview that, it's not him making that determination. It's the medical staff. They're going to have their consultations and say, can he go? I would assume Devon wants to go. That's just his personality. He's not one that wants to sit out and be the guy that just lets somebody else come in. We asked him questions on Monday night about Bird potentially getting that start, and you can kind of see the fire in his eyes where, he respects Bird and he wants Bird to be able to be successful, but there's so much passion there that he doesn't want to admit that there's a chance that he can't go. And so, he's going to be pushing to go. But I think this comes down to the conversation of is he better served to rest as opposed to being the player on the field, right? You've seen a great Bird Ficklin in the first, part of the season where he's 9 of 9. He's got, a bunch of touchdowns, 1 passing, and I think he has 3 rushing, but at the same time, you don't really know how he's going to react to, starter minute type situations. And so that's going to be the interesting thing. Is Bird serviceable enough that you can put him in? If you talk to some subset of the fans that he's already ready, The reality is any true freshman is going to have some problems. And, even if Colorado isn't maybe the Texas Tech or the BYU, they're still a pretty solid team. And that's going to be a tough test for any true freshman quarterback to come in. So it's really just weighing the options and trying to see what it is. As Kyle said, they're going to have it hopefully decided by Friday, if not sooner. We're going to get the first test of that tonight when the availability report shows up. Is Devon Dampier on there? I would be surprised if he's not, at the very least questionable. If he's probable, doubtful, whatever that may be, those are going to be the biggest questions that have to be answered. And so it's going to be an interesting situation to see how Utah manages this one and how they approach it. So, we'll see, right? Like, I think the team has true faith in Bird Ficklin. There's conversations with some players that talked about that if he is the guy, like, there's not any ounce of lack of confidence. They truly believe that he can be the guy that can help them. The fortunate thing there is that he runs a very similar style to Devon, so there's not going to be wholesale changes to the team. There may be more of an emphasis in one area, maybe more emphasis in, it's hard to say more emphasis in running because Utah has emphasized that a lot, but there could be more emphasis in running the ball, doing different things that way. But at the same time, the team feels like they have some consistency here. So we'll see. I think part of that goes into why Kyle wasn't fully committed to Bird being QB2 for the entirety of the season. I think they want to see how this game goes, assuming that he's the starter. And if he handles it well, maybe there's a real possibility that he is the official QB2. Now, whatever that means, can be debated. He's gotten all the QB2 reps, so it's like I said in the question, it's semantics because at the end of the day, he is QB2. You can give that label to Isaac Wilson all you want, but at the end of the day, it's been Bird. So, I think there's just a little bit difference of a game with Isaac. We don't get to see what it's like in practice. Has he taken the steps that he needs to be able to progress and move forward? Is he studying film? Is he getting the ball out quickly? Is he making decisions quickly? Those are the things that are going to factor into that. And for whatever reason, they feel like Bird is picking it up faster or performing at a better level in practice and in the game. So that's where it's at. You can label him QB2. You can label him QB3. It doesn't really matter. He's QB2 in reality. So, you got that. So the Devon Dampier thing is going to be really fascinating to watch. Quite honestly, that may be the biggest storyline going into this game. It's just simply because Utah's been really effective at moving the ball with him. Part of that has been his ability to extend plays with his legs. Obviously, he has designed keepers, so those are designed. But he's been great in what he does to be able to move the offense. Bird has done similarly that in the reps that he's gotten, but some of that has come in garbage. Well, a lot of that has come in garbage minutes, and so it'll be curious to see how that translates if he is the guy. So can Utah continue to move? They still have the same personnel outside of the quarterback, but what does he do? So big thing check. Tonight will be the biggest glimpse into how Utah's handling that. If Devon Dampier is not on that availability report, I think people are going to revolt, and I don't blame them because there's clearly a situation where it's questionable as to whether he plays, and so at the very least, he's got to have that 25% designation of questionable. But you never know. Maybe there really isn't a situation where he's not available, and it's always going to be available. I don't know. Kyle can turn it however he wants. So that's where it's at. Now, the little snippet I want to jump into before we fully commit to the Colorado stuff is going back to the fourth down situation. We've had conversations about that. We talked about it on Monday and kind of Utah's insistence on sticking with the analytics. And, I wanted to get a little deeper into that because I believe it. I believe that Kyle wants to stick to the analytics. But at the same time, Kyle very much so is a guy that isn't just so risk adverse that he's willing to just go for everything, right? I think he's putting a good face on a situation where he's not trying to throw people under the bus. And that's honestly always been Kyle. He's the first to recognize players and their success, but he doesn't ever want to throw a guy under the bus. Now, that's not to say that hasn't happened. There's been, years past where he's 100% thrown the specialists under the bus and said we just are terrible at kicking, or we've done certain things this way. And it's kind of funny to see because it just doesn't happen from him. So I think by and large he's trying to protect Dylan Curtis, who is a freshman place kicker, right? Clearly has a big leg. Like, you see it in what he does in kickoffs. He's been great for Utah in that regard, where he's been able to get more touchbacks than anything. Utah's not trying to figure out how to kick it out of the end zone. He's been able to be great there. His biggest issue has just been consistency in field goals. And you heard some of that on Monday from Kyle talking about how from that, 43, 46 yard range area, they've really struggled. And so there's been a situation where it's not that they've lost faith in Dylan Curtis, but they're trying to weigh their odds. And so if the analytics are tilted, and I wrote a lot about this, so you can kind of go read the story that I posted to KSL.com today about this whole situation. The analytics were saying 45% kick the field goal, 43% go for it on fourth down. That's what Kyle said. And so when you have a situation where things are kind of close, right now they've been leaning more heavily into the analytics. One, because you've got a quarterback and an offensive line that has been able to get you the yards that you need. So you've been able to convert very well on fourth downs. Two, you want to go get touchdowns, right? You want to be able to get the points, and if you're in a good situation where you can do that, and most of the time Utah's not going to be in those 4th and 7 situations. They've been at the minimum the maximum 4th and 3, but they've been able to kind of get out of those situations. Lastly, you've got to factor into, what the kicking situation looks like. And especially on that 4th and 7, when Dylan Curtis went out there and in the practice kick, as BYU called timeout, the ball completely went wide right. It just wasn't anywhere near. It was not a great kick. And, that happens at times, and then guys settle in and they come back and do it. But I think I know they felt much more confident in being able to have Devon throw the ball. And there's other aspects to that play where it broke down, where there wasn't proper blocking or there wasn't proper things that happened. All those things factor into it. And so it's tough to fully judge fourth downs based on the coaching decision, based on how it was executed, but that's neither here nor there. So I wanted to get a little bit deeper into this to kind of look at that kicking situation to see if Utah has lost faith in Dylan Curtis. And Sammy Mora from 24/7 Sports asked this on Monday to Kyle Whittingham, asking if they've lost faith in him. Kyle didn't directly answer that, but they did say that, they felt they had a better shot of going for it. Yesterday, I asked Sharif Shah, who's a special teams coordinator, kind of his take on this, kind of how he approaches this and how they work with Dylan. And I think his response really gets to the heart of the situation. So I want to play that in its entirety because, one, Shah is just a great listen, and two, I think it really gets to kind of where Utah's at and why they insisted on going for it on fourth down. And I think I would hope that this kind of gives some better context, that after the emotions of not getting those plays and not being able to convert on fourth down have kind of subsided, you kind of understand why Utah felt the need to go into that.
There's been a lot of attention on Dylan Curtis and the fact of Utah not kicking field goals. How, as a coach, just in general, how do you help a guy like that and keeping his confidence up as a freshman?
You just said it, especially as a freshman. We knew that we're going to have to be a roller coaster. Anytime you have a talented freshman that comes in, especially as a kicker, a freshman at any position, but there are so few opportunities to come in and show your coaches that I can perform under an immense amount of pressure. 3 points, we need these 3 points right now. And so for every kick that he was unsuccessfully made, we continue to tell him, look, that doesn't define you. I want to see your practice kicks become much more consistent, because invariably who you are in practice will be exactly who you'll be in the game. So we just continue to put in front of him opportunity after opportunity. Let's start with a good, consistent foundation, which is what he's doing now, and he continues to do. So when my head coach comes to me and says, hey, listen, what do we look like at field goal? I want to be able to tell him, Coach, we're incredibly solid because we have a solid week of practice. I can show you that. But if we're all over the place in practice, no one has any confidence in me to tell my head coach, let's go for it now on the field goal. So it's continuing to build Dylan up, making sure that he never loses confidence in himself, because we at no point have lost confidence in him, and making him a good practice player, giving him practice situations to kick, intermediate balls, sometimes with a 25, 35, a 48-yarder, 55-yarder, right after we finish a team session. But just putting him in those situations and giving him that success that he has, but showing him consistently that you have it, buddy. Don't let it wane. We will not stop believing in Dylan Curtis. We love him. He's just a freshman, and it's part of the process.
And it is part of the process, right? Like, he's a freshman, and as good of a kicker as he is and as heralded as he is coming in, there's going to be some things where you have to work on that, right? Like, things change when you get to college. And so what worked in high school may not always work at the collegiate level. And I think that's a great response, right? Like, Sharif Shah has to be the one accountable to that. And if he doesn't have confidence, why should Kyle have confidence, right? And the telltale signs were there early, because in fall camp, when we would ask Kyle Whittingham about how the kicking situation was going, he said it was shaky, right? Like, he essentially said that there was good days and there was bad days. And that essentially applies to the exact same situation that they're in right now. What it's coming down to is they need Dylan Curtis to be more consistent in practice. And that's not an indication of that he can't be there or not, right? Like, this is not a situation that they've lost faith in him. It's more, they just don't have faith consistently in the sense that they can get a converted field goal all the time. And so if it has been a good week of practice, maybe that leads into that a little bit more. That's kind of the situation that they're in. So you can be frustrated at the fourth downs, and look, I can join in with you and say, like, why did Utah go with that? But when you strip back all of just the immediacy of the game and the emotions and losing to your rival and not getting it, there's a lot more that factors into these games than many people realize. And that was part of it, right? You've got to be able to have the confidence from what you've seen in practice. If you have a guy that goes out there and is not performing in practice, but then suddenly shows up on the field, that's just kind of an anomaly. There was a certain running back a few years ago who was just not great in practice. And then he showed up in games and absolutely dominated and kind of lived up in the bright lights. But that's more rare, and it doesn't give coaches confidence, and that's why things aren't always favorable for those players in terms of how coaches talk about them, because things have to be shown in practice, right? If your job is on the line, and I'm not saying that Kyle or any of the coaches' jobs are on the line per se, but when your job is on the line and you're relying on somebody to do it, you want to go with the hot hand in practice, right? You want to see the guy that's putting in the time and the effort and doing it. Now, I'm not saying that Dylan Curtis isn't putting in the time and the effort. Coaches are more likely to go with the guy that is putting in that effort, even if they're not successful, right? But you still need to have a high level of consistency for them to feel confident in you. And so I think that's really going into a lot of the situation here on fourth down. The truth is Utah has been successful on fourth down, so it hasn't been a concern. The problem came on Saturday when you weren't successful on fourth downs. And then suddenly now there's this criticism of where things are going. You can say that it's because Kyle's washed, right? Like, he needs to move on. Like, I get that. I get that frustration. But there's a much more that goes into it than just him as a coach and not adapting to the times or not doing, like, the reality is Utah's still on pace for a 10-2 season. They're still favored in their remaining games. They still have the potential to be able to do it. And barring injury or setbacks based off of that kind of stuff, they're still in a great position to get there. That still may not even be good enough to get into the Big 12 title game, as I talked about on Monday. But you're still in a good position. And I understand it's frustrating and it's not a great situation and it's really hard to deal with. But there's so much more that goes on in behind the scenes that leads into this. So I hope that provides some context into what's going on. I'm not here to defend any of that kind of stuff. That's not my job. My job is to just report the news and the facts and try to get some of those nuances, right? because it's real easy to go watch the game and say, you know what, that sucked. Kyle sucks. Like everybody's going to have those types of emotions because you're frustrated. You want to be able to have consistency, and you want to be able to win those games, and you're frustrated that you're losing 3 straight to your rival when you've truly believed that you should have had the last 2. Those types of things are there. And as I say this, there was also controversy about what took place with Dylan before the game, and there's a lot of frustrations about him kicking during BYU's prayer. As I'm talking about this, Dylan Curtis literally just tweeted this right now, and he says, "I've been debating for a few days whether I make a comment on me kicking during the prayer, and at first I decided to just let it blow over, but I realized that it isn't the right thing to do. I just wanted to apologize to anyone I offended. I really didn't mean anything negative by it, and especially didn't have harsh intentions. I was just warming up when my coaches told me to warm up." That's part of that as well. That's another conversation as part of this. Look, these guys are dialed in. Some of them have headphones. Some of them have, whatever. That's part of it. I'm not going to get into this because I don't really think it merits a situation. I don't think anybody would intentionally try to do that stuff during a prayer, but at the same time, I'm not even going to merit this because it's kind of frustrating. But that is what it is. So let's move on. Let's go to Colorado. I think there's been a lot of conversations about BYU, but it's honestly time to move on. And I think this is the perfect time to do it. So just real briefly, just looking at this Colorado team, and I have a special guest coming on here shortly that we'll get into this more deeply than what I'm going to do. But looking at this Colorado team, it's a completely different team, right? Like you had Shadir Sanders, you had Travis Hunter, 2 star players that really made everything for Colorado. And it clearly is more than just that, right? Like clearly 22 guys have to fill the field. They've got to be able to perform on both ends of the field, and it's more than just 2 players, but it's clear the difference that this Colorado team is when you don't have those types of players, and that's for any team in the country. With that said, Kyle Whittingham talked about this team as being much better than their record shows, right? This team is 3-4. They're 1-3 in Big 12 play. Their one win in Big 12 play actually is their last game. It's a ranked win over Iowa State. They won 24-17, and Iowa State's, banged up. They've got some injuries that they're dealing with as well, but so is Colorado, and they found a way to come out on top. They get that right before a bye week, and so a great situation for Colorado where maybe things are starting to click. And this team, they're not full of the same star power that you maybe heard of in the first part of Coach Prime's tenure at Colorado. But that doesn't mean that this team isn't growing or that he's not growing as a coach. And I think this is where you're really starting to see how good of a coach he can be. And the record may not reflect it entirely, but this is a team that is solid. And the real danger here is that Utah is that 14-point favorite. How do you balance that, knowing that this is a good team, that Utah's had an emotional weekend, and you've got to kind of pair those things together? So, there's a real danger spot here of not performing up to the level that you need to because you thought you were going to win against BYU. But like this Colorado team is more than capable of doing what they need to. They were up 14-0 on BYU. BYU, had to come back late in the game to be able to get it done. This is a team that can do it. They're not, I would say this team is not elite. They're not even great. They're probably an upper level good team that in the right circumstances can be great in a game if it works, right? They've got a quarterback in Caden Salter who, early on had some mixed reviews in kind of how he performed. He got benched for a minute as they brought in their second and third string quarterback to kind of test how things are going. But it honestly didn't work, and Salter has been the best player available. And so, this is who they're going with, and so far it's been decent. He's completing 65% of his passes for 1,100 yards. He's doing well. He's getting 9 touchdowns. He has thrown 4 interceptions, but it hasn't been terrible per se. He also has rushed for 270 yards and 5 touchdowns on 65 carries as the team's second leading rusher. So, there is some dual threat abilities there. He's much better at being able to do that, but at the same time, he's not this elite quarterback that you have to fully prepare for, but that's not to say that he can't beat Utah. And so there's going to have to still be, a lot of assignment sound football. Utah's struggles with tackling can come into play where, Utah has been really good at getting into the backfield, and you saw this last week against BYU, against Bear Bachmeier. They were great at getting into the backfield. Like, they were there, they were pressuring him, they were getting QB hits, they were just in his face, but they just couldn't close out and they couldn't get to him at the end, right? And so that's where kind of Utah has to move forward. And so if you can get that quarterback to slip out, you have real danger of Salter extending the play with his feet. And, that's kind of the biggest danger there. But this is a team that they're not scoring a ton. They're averaging about 25 points a game. They're, middle of the country, in passing and rushing. They rank 82nd and 84th respectively. And so it's just not really great, but it's still not bad either. And when you look at the run numbers, they were dead last in the country last year. I mean, this Colorado team, they didn't have the offensive line. They didn't have the power to be able to do what they needed to in the run game, and just were terrible. They were 134th in the country in running or run game. It just wasn't great. And so the fact that they rank 84th in the country now shows that they've made improvements, right? Their offensive line is better. It's still not this great offensive line, but it's still better than what they had last year, and it's what they've needed to be able to be effective. And so you're doing enough on the offensive side of the ball to get it done. And you just can't look at Colorado and say, oh, they're not good, they're not having a great season, and then gloss over it and not be able to respect that, because this is a team that is improved. And so you have to, improved in different areas, right? Like they're worse than last year, but improved in like the run game. When they get in the red zone, they do convert it at a high rate, 88.9%. They're scoring touchdowns there. This is a team that when they get in that situation, they're finding opportunities to score. And so you have to respect them. You have to be ready to stop them, get them out of the red zone. Don't even give them an opportunity to score, because they have been pretty efficient there. Just looking at a few more stats, I don't want to bog a lot of these things down. Some of the things looking here, this is a team that's pretty evenly split in the passing and the run game, 49.6 passing to their run, 50.4. So pretty balanced team. They're still going to emphasize a little bit more of the run. But the biggest thing here is that this team is the 10th in the country in explosive plays. So when they do pop off, they are pretty explosive, and they can do some danger, or they can be some dangerous things there. So I'm really curious to kind of see how that factors in. That's just one stat. They're not quite consistent enough to be able to make that beat you all the time, but that's not to say that you can't start stacking those and doing things to be able to beat opposing teams. And clearly it worked against Iowa State. They were able to do it, and so it's definitely possible. Offensive line has improved. They're getting a consistent push there. It's still not great, but they're getting a consistent push. But they're also allowing 11.4% of their plays to be havoc plays, meaning that ranks 113th in the country, meaning it's improved, but they're still allowing a lot to get into the backfield. So, whether that be turnovers, whether that be tackles for loss, or, sacks, or whatever that may be, teams are able to get in the backfield. And so that's going to be a key stat for Utah in this game, is if that front seven can really make that offensive line work, Utah has a real potential to be able to do some damage. Now, with that, the caveat there is that Lander Barton will not be available for the first half of the game because of the targeting penalty that he sustained against BYU. And so, you're losing one of your best players on the defensive side of the ball for that first half. So really, it's just being able to maintain and not get burned. It's not that Utah doesn't have players there. They clearly have Levani Damuni. You've got John O'Hall. You've got guys that can fill that void. But you can't allow Colorado to get going early, because that just puts you in a hole, and you've got to make sure that you're in a good position to not let that happen. So, this is overall, this is just kind of a middling team right now, still trying to figure themselves out. The first part of the year was much more of a frustration as the team tried to blend different things, trying to blend how you get that new quarterback into the system. Deion Sanders has only coached Shadir Sanders his entire life, and so now this is a different time for him to be able to coach up a player that is different than his son, where he knows the ins and outs of that. Now he has to work a little bit differently. And I still think that there's a lot of substance to Deion Sanders as a coach. He's not just all the flash that many people want to see. And I think you're going to start seeing some of that. And so you can't go into this game not respecting that, because this team, even though they're not, flashing on all these statistical categories, and they don't have a quarterback that's leading the country like you did with Shadir Sanders in passing and, performing high in all of these different metrics, this team is absolutely capable of beating a Utah team, especially after an emotional loss. So a lot to pay attention to, but this is not one of those games that Utah should fear per se, but at the same time, that fear comes down to just coming off of those emotions and being able to get into that. So let's continue this with a conversation with a special guest. But first, let me tell you about our partners at Canyon View Credit Union. At Canyon View Credit Union, it's on the house. Close a mortgage and get a free appraisal up to $600. To learn more details or apply, visit canyonviewcu.com. All right, joining me today is Brian Howell. He's the beat writer for Buff Zone and the Boulder Daily Camera. He's been on this beat for quite a while. He's seen Colorado when they've been good. He's seen them when they've been bad. He's got everything that he can tell you about this Colorado team. But happy to have him join the podcast today. Brian, how you been? What's it like in Colorado right now?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, it's been mostly bad that I've seen CU, unfortunately. But yeah, it's good in Colorado. That the weather's nice. It's a nice fall, and I'm excited for fall weather and all that. And looks like it's gonna be kind of rainy in Salt Lake City this weekend. If I saw that right, is that right?
Yeah, it's been weird. We get these good days, and then the weekends come, and they go full football weather. We got to get the rain,
Yeah.
So it'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine. But yeah, overall, it's been good. I mean, it's been an up and down season for the Buffs, but we'll see. I mean, they got potential to go out and win any of these games left on their schedule, and so we'll see how it works out.
This Colorado team, obviously, they lose their Heisman winner, they lose a star quarterback, they lose a bunch of players from last year, and so it's not fair to compare this team to last year. But at the same time, this is a decent Colorado team that just has struggled to kind of get things going early on. They're 3-4, 1-3 in Big 12 play, but right before their bye week, they do get a win over a ranked Iowa State team at the time. That obviously is, great opportunity to go into a bye week. You get that kind of momentum. What's kind of the general vibe of this Colorado team after that, knowing that, it's been kind of trying to figure some things out those first few games?
Yeah, I mean, the general vibe is basically what Kyle Whittingham said at the start of his presser the other day, is this team is much better than its record. And that's how Colorado feels. I mean, they feel like they have let too many opportunities slip away to this point. And, they're 3-4, and you look at their season, it's like they lost by one touchdown to Georgia Tech, who's now, I think, number 7 in the country and undefeated. And, Georgia Tech scored that winning touchdown with 2 minutes left in the game. So the Buffs were right there against them. They had a 14-0 lead on BYU, which is now 7-0 and ranked number 11 in the country, and coughed it up, and only lost by 3 in that one, but they were right there. And then they go to TCU the next week. They're up 14-0 again, and lose that game. It looked bad. It was 35-21, but TCU threw a touchdown with like 20 seconds left, and I mean, it was a tight ball game throughout. So it was first time in CU history, by the way, back-to-back games they've had 14-point leads and lost. So these are the opportunities they're looking at and saying, man, we lost some games we never should have lost. And then the Houston game, they were dealing with some quarterback stuff, and they were using their backup quarterback, and it wasn't a good day out there in Houston. But I feel like if they played Houston again, they would play that much better. But we'll never see that again. But so the vibe around this team is that maybe Iowa State was the flip of the switch, and that they figured out how to finish a game, because that's what they did, is they finally finished a game against a good team.
What would you say is the identity of this team? Because it seems like, like Kyle was talking about, this is a better team than their record. They're a better rushing team than they were last year, but they're not quite great either, right? They're just kind of stuck in that middling area of statistics and everything there. What is the identity of this team?
I don't know if there is one, because of that. I mean, it's just kind of, I think they're trying to figure it out. I mean, last year we knew what their identity was. I mean, it's they couldn't run the ball, but they had a quarterback that could sling it, and they could score at any point in time. I mean, the identity of this team is just trying to figure it out. I mean, they can run the ball, they can throw the ball, but they're not doing it consistently. They can stop the run, they can stop the pass, but they don't do it consistently. So I think the identity is the fact that they're inconsistent, and that you never know what you're going to get with this team. They could come out and take a 14-0 lead. They could fall behind 17-0. So I don't know what you're going to get with this team, and so identity is ongoing. It's a work in progress, that's for sure.
Obviously, when Coach Prime comes to Boulder, it was this spectacle, right? Like, and you got to witness it firsthand. I mean, you had College Game Day, you had Big Noon Kickoff, you had everything there in Boulder where everybody in the star attention was there. Now, a few years into that, it seems like it's waned a little bit. I don't know if this is exactly a fair question, but has Prime's kind of, I wouldn't even call it cachet, but has his kind of the aura around that kind of waned a little bit? Not in the sense that people aren't listening to him or that he doesn't have that same value, but what has changed, I guess? That's probably the best way to say about it.
Well, I think what's changed is, I mean, being around it for 3 years, is you realize the big stars were Travis and Shedeur.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Prime is obviously a star, and he is who he is. And but the draw, I think, for a lot of people was Travis and Shedeur, because they were the ones out there on the field, starring and making this team 9-4 last year. Coach Prime is just a coach, and I mean, really around any sport, who goes to watch a coach, right? Even as big of a name as a Nick Saban would be, people aren't going to Alabama to watch Nick Saban. They're going there because they've got great players. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is that Travis and Shedeur, they were big time stars. I mean, you could argue whether they were the best players in college football or not, or whether Travis should have won the Heisman. I mean, Boise fans will say no, but the fact of the matter is that what's undeniable is they were the two biggest stars in college football last year, and they don't have that this year. And so you don't have the other stars, coming around as much. I mean, Michael Irvin is a good friend of Coach Prime, so he's around a lot, and Terrell Owens is around a lot, but Little Wayne hasn't rapped in the end zone since 2023. I met Dr. J on the sidelines, I think last year or the year before. Just the amount of star power on the sidelines. The sidelines are quieter before games, and it's more just kind of getting down to the football aspect of it now.
To that point, do you think that helps Coach Prime in kind of who he is as a coach, saying it's not just this flash, he actually has substance to him? And I think everybody kind of believed that, even if you could, even if you hated Prime or whatever that may be. Do you think this is now where you get to see who Coach Prime is as a coach?
Yeah, I think so. And I agree with you. Like, the substance was always there, but it was hard to see it for some people because it was all the flash. And some people will say, well, they're 3-4. Where's the substance?
Yeah.
But look, anybody that followed this Colorado program before he got here knows that there's some substance to what he's doing. I mean, you were there. I mean, you remember 2022 when Utah came to Boulder, and I think it was 63-21 or something like that. And Utah could have scored more if they wanted to. And, there's substance here. I mean, this team before he got here was not losing one-score games to Georgia Techs and BYUs and teams like that. So, they're losing some games right now, but you can see it. I mean, this should be a bowl team, and they can still get there. And if they go to a bowl game second year in a row, that hasn't been done at Colorado in 20 years. I mean, that's a huge piece of substance for Coach Prime. I mean, that's something that if I'm him, I lean into that and I hang my hat onto that if they can get there.
Shifting a little bit to kind of this game tonight, we're going to get our first availability report. And quite honestly, Colorado's has been lengthy for the last couple weeks. They've been injured a ton. I mean, Utah understands what that's like last year, especially. It's tough to be able to have that consistency when you do have a bunch of these guys out. Kind of give us an update on what that injury report looks like. You know, obviously that we probably don't know all the details, but what does this week look like in terms of health going into that Utah game?
Yeah, well, they had 20 guys out against Iowa State, which is just a major number. You know, I mean, it's 20% of the roster. So they had those guys out. Some I think are out for the year. They don't really talk about that, but like there's a defensive lineman transfer from Fresno State, Gabriel Lightfoot, who they were depending on coming into this year. He never played a snap and had surgery. And he's announced on social media he's out for the year. So there's things like that. DeKalen Taylor is a running back that came from Incarnate Word and rushed for almost 1,000 yards last year. I saw him on campus on one of those little carts that people often use when they have an Achilles injury. We don't know what his injury is, but it didn't look good when you're on a cart. So there's some big injuries. But I was telling you before we started here, I mean, Coach Prime doesn't talk about injuries, but you know, his son Dion Jr. posts a lot of videos on Well Off Media on YouTube, and watching the practice video from this week, there's a lot of guys that were out against Iowa State that are participating in practice this week, and so that's a positive sign. And key guys that were practicing were Arden Walker, who is a starting defensive end and probably their best pass rusher, who didn't play against Iowa State. He was practicing this week. Draylon Miller, who's a receiver turned running back, missed the Iowa State game, but he was practicing this week. RJ Johnson, if you look at PFF and take that for whatever you want, but he's their highest rated corner and only played a couple of games before he got hurt. He was practicing this week. And they've been really shaky at that second corner spot. So if he's healthy, that's going to be huge for them. So, Tafiq Thomas is another one, defensive lineman. He's missed 4 games in a row. He was practicing. So they're getting some guys back, I think. And I think the bye week came at a good time for them. They're not fully healthy, but I think it came at a good time for them.
On the Utah side, there's been a lot of conversation about the health of Devon Dampier this week. Obviously, we'll find out tonight if he's even on the availability report. It sounds like there's a high probability that the true freshman quarterback will get the start this weekend. Has there been any conversations on the Colorado side about this, or kind of what their preparation is going into this game?
Yeah, yesterday we met with Coach Prime, and he was asked that specifically, like, how do you prepare for, Utah potentially playing their backup quarterback and facing or preparing for 2 quarterbacks? And he goes, well, we don't. We're just preparing for their scheme. And so we're preparing for what they do, because what they do is really good, and I think that's probably the smart way to go about it, because my perspective from Utah over the years, and then it better than I do, is Utah wants to run the football, and that's what you got to prepare for. And no matter who their quarterback is, they want to run the football, and they're really good at it right now. And I think that's the bigger concern for Colorado, is that run game, which includes Bert Ficklin or Devon Dampier. So I think that that's a bigger concern for them. And quite frankly, they've struggled against running quarterbacks. And so no matter who Utah plays, either one of those guys can run. I think that Utah should feel good about it because of the results CU's had against running quarterbacks this year.
Colorado has a new quarterback in Caden Salter, and you mentioned that there was some kind of back and forth there, and for whatever reason they decided to take him out. What has allowed them to kind of hitch their wagon to him now? Like, why do they feel confident? Where's he at as a player, and where they want to be at Colorado?
Yeah, I mean, they're going with him because he's their best guy. They were frustrated with him early in the year, and it's been a rocky marriage. Let's put it that way. He's not a bad kid, but I tell people this all the time. We have to remember that Coach Prime, his entire coaching career from Little League on, he got into coaching to coach Shador and Shiloh.
Yeah, and
so from Little League to Trinity Christian and Dallas to Jackson State, his entire career, his quarterback has been Shador. So there's a high standard that he has there. I mean, Shador, for whatever NFL people want to say about him right now, he's a tremendous leader. He's a tremendous quarterback, and that's what Coach Prime's used to. Caden Salter's not the same type of leader. wasn't doing the same type of things Shador does as a leader, and that frustrated this staff. I'm like, come on, dude, step up. You're the quarterback. Lead this team. And he's not a natural leader, so they struggle with that. And it was kind of weird. He played okay against Georgia Tech. Admitted he had some jitters, which makes sense. But he had him in the game. The next week against Delaware, Coach Prime came out with a predetermined, you get 2 drives. Julian Lewis, the 5-star freshman, gets 2 drives. And then we'll give our third stringer, Ryan Staub, 2 drives. And Staub was the best one of the 3, against Delaware of all teams. But Salter played well that game, but Staub gave him a spark. And so the next week at Houston, they benched Salter and threw Staub in there, and it didn't go well. And then the next week, Salter's back in there. But I know I'm giving you a long answer here, but it's just kind of, they've been frustrated a little bit with that leadership. It's been very up and down with Salter. He plays well against BYU. Then he goes to TCU, throws 3 interceptions in the first half, 2 in the last 2 minutes of the first half, and that really changed that game. And then he comes back last week and plays really well against Iowa State. So it's been up and down. The potential is clearly there, but he's playing because he gives them the best shot right now. Julian Lewis is not ready. He's a 5-star freshman, but he's not ready. He should be a senior in high school right now because he graduated early. And Ryan Staub's he's the third stringer. Yeah. He played the last time the Buffs were at Utah and nearly won the game, but he's the third stringer for a reason.
It makes sense. You can't be relying on your third string guy, quite honestly.
No.
Utah's had to deal with that 5th string. It's fun. So we talked.
And they beat Ryan Staub with their 5th string quarterback, right?
That's true. They did.
That was such a weird game, by the way.
That was a weird game.
The Buffs went to Utah.
Let's hope we don't get that this time, but a little more entertaining. Not that it wasn't entertaining by any means.
No, it was entertaining, yeah.
Travis Hunter did get that touchdown. I'm just going to say it, but
yes, he did. He got both of them, but he didn't get either one.
He didn't, so neither here nor there. So we'll see.
Yeah.
You did mention the run game last year was just abysmal, right? Like they just it also wasn't an emphasis, right? Like they clearly were emphasizing Shadur's passing, everything that way, but they rank last in the FBS in rushing this year. Much improved this year. I think they're somewhere around 82nd, 84th, somewhere around there. What has been the difference this year as opposed to maybe last year? Obviously quarterback change and everything, but what's been the biggest difference for this team?
The biggest difference is offensive line. They finally have a quality offensive line, which they didn't have the last 2 years. I mean, I've kind of joked, but I'm serious. I've told people if Shador had this offensive line, he would have been in New York last year because, he got sacked. Well, CU quarterbacks got sacked 99 times the previous 2 years combined. Shador was running for his life half the time, and he still put up the numbers he did. I mean, if he had this kind of protection, he's in New York. I mean, I just firmly believe that. They're playing really good up front. And, Jordan Seaton, their left tackle, was the number 1 rated offensive line recruit in the 2024 class, just a sophomore. And he's playing like it, like he's the top rated guy. He's I don't know where he ranks in PFF right now, but I think after Iowa State, he was number 1 in the country as far as pass blocking grade. They got other guys. Xavier Hill was an all-conference guy at Memphis. Zarian McGill has been a career center coming from Louisiana Lafayette, Louisiana Tech, and then he was at Monroe before that. So they brought guys in that are just better, and so they're better at pass blocking. They're better at run blocking. And it just shows. I mean, they don't give up as many sacks. And it helps you have your running quarterback. Shador could run, but he didn't a lot of times. Caden Salter will take off and run, and he'll burn you with a designed QB run for 30 yards. Shador wouldn't do that. Shador would scramble and pick up 30. But, Salter's runs are a little bit more dangerous at times.
Who are maybe some of the players on this team that Utah should pay attention to?
Yeah, boy, it changes week to week. But I mean, receiver-wise, they are loaded. But there's 2 guys they've been relying on a lot: Omarion Miller and Joseph Williams. That they had a slow start because Salter had a slow start, but they're really playing well. And Joseph Williams was the freshman of the year in the American Conference last year at Tulsa. Omarion Miller is just kind of a guy that he's flashed. in the past 2 years, but always been behind Hunter and Jimmy Horn and guys like that. But he's a number one type of receiver. So those two guys, Draylon Miller, if he's healthy, is a receiver that shifted to running back a few weeks ago because they're depleted there. And so they ought to watch out for him. And then another guy that I'm actually writing about today, Cam Michael, is another one of those guys that was a receiver that is now at running back. He played against Iowa State and didn't do much, but he was like one of the top rated athletes in the country coming out of high school a couple of years ago. Had offers from everybody, Georgia Tech, Tennessee, schools like that. And he's super fast, and they put him at the podium this week. So I think there's some potential there for him to be a weapon that's used this week. And so I would watch out for him as well.
Nice. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction, but I am going to ask you it a little differently in the sense, how does Colorado lose this game?
Colorado loses this game if Utah plays its game and forgets about last week. I think, honestly, I think if Utah, I think it's the last 2 times they've lost to BYU, they've lost the next week. Is that right?
I think so.
So just, again, my perception of that rivalry is it's such an emotional and physical drain to play the BYU Utah rivalry that, those teams kind of come out of it a little scarred. And if Utah is over that and just focuses on CU and plays its game, I think they'll win because while CU's better up front, I don't think they match up physically with Utah, and the Buffs have struggled with physicality. And so I think that's where Utah probably would win this game, is if they're just more physical.
That makes sense. Trench play has been a big thing for Utah, and when they do win in the trenches, it has been pretty. I wouldn't call it easy, but it has been much easier for Utah to get those wins. So it makes sense.
And I'll say too that, I mean, Salter hasn't been sacked a ton, but Utah could change that. This offensive line has played well, but I'm not sure they've played a defensive front as good as Utah's, and so I think that's going to be a huge challenge for CU.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian. Tell everybody where they can find you and see what you're working on right now.
Yeah, go to buffzone.com, and then I'm on Twitter or X at Brian Howell 33.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Sounds good. We'll see you then.
All right, we thank Brian for coming on. He's followed this program for a long time. Like I said early on, he's seen the ups and downs. He's been around it. He's got good insight on how this team can operate, and I think he had some good perspective on this team. Look, if Utah can play their game and if they can win in the trenches, this feels like it should go Utah's way. You're at home, but never doubt these games. They've always had some sort of wonkiness over the years. Not all. I mean, Utah's pretty much dominated most of these games, but they have some potential for weirdness, and so you can't let this Colorado team in. And if you do, you can't afford to be able to kind of get into a close battle here. Not saying that Utah can't win in a close game, but you want to make sure that you can make this a little bit more convincing, just to be able to give your team confidence moving forward that they can do it. And that'll depend on if it's Devon Dampier, that'll depend on if it's Bird Ficklin. There's a lot that go into this game that it's not quite easy to just say, oh yeah, this is going to be easily Utah's things. If Utah can play the game style that they have for most of the season, where they come out aggressive, they move the ball, I don't want to say with ease, but they move the ball with a consistency that has allowed them to be able to get third and fourth downs, then things can be fine. But if they start getting into trouble there and things go a little south, this could be a real worry for Utah. So looking forward to this game. It's a late kick. You're going to get your late environment, and you're going to be able to finally have that drone show that you were hoping for, assuming that the rain cooperates. But should be a fun environment. It's the Stripe Stadium, and there's going to be some entertainment for this game, and being able to try to move on and kind of close out the season strong. So with that, we're gonna end today's podcast, and hopefully you have a great weekend, and we'll come back after this next week. I may be a little bit delayed. I'm gonna be traveling right after the game. My family's going out of town, and so I want to kind of we'll see how I can get this podcast, but we'll see what that looks like. With that, enjoy your weekend, enjoy another week of college football in Utah, and we'll sign off and have a great day.